Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. Patrick Callahan. I'm the founder and president of the Alliance for Excellence in Online Education. I want to thank you for joining us this morning for this very timely presentation on the challenges facing higher education. We are very fortunate to have with us executives from three of our founding member institutions, Baker College, Walsh College, and Oakland Community College, to talk about their respective colleges and addressing the many challenges that are facing the institutions. I do want to thank our member institutions for their ongoing support for promoting best practices and recognizing teaching excellence in online education. This is our 21st year of partnering with our member institutions to really embrace the accomplishments of our faculty and team members, but also really looking at best practices in online education. I really want to thank Walsh College for supporting the technology platform we're using this morning for this presentation, and specifically to Dr. Drew Smith for his support. As the academic year kind of winds down, I actually want to take this opportunity to officially announce that Dr. Sean Moore, who's the Director of Online Education at Oakland University, will be taking over as president of the Alliance. So I want to thank Sean for that. Dr. Moore has been a true leader in the field of online education. We're really fortunate to have him and all the leaders within the Alliance to be part of the team. I'll still be involved as founder and CEO, so I look forward to working with Sean and all of our team members and making sure we're still promoting and celebrating best practices in online education. Speaking of Dr. Moore, I'll now turn the meeting over to him as he is going to introduce our panelists and host this morning's meeting. So Dr. President, take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Patrick, and welcome everyone. We'll have some more folks joining us, I'm sure, as we move along here. But I'm also really excited about this panel. Not to put any pressure on our panelists here, but I'm going to, as Patrick said, I'm Sean Moore, the director of e-learning at Oakland University. I'd like to really quickly introduce some of our panelists, and I'll let them say a few things about themselves. I'm going to say in order of my who I like the best, as you're supposed to do, I believe, in these situations. So first, I'm going to introduce Dr. Jennifer Byrne. She's a provost at Oakland Community College, and it's the closest name to Oakland University, so that's why she's our favorite here on there, naturally. We also have Dr. Joanna Palmer, and she is the associate provost at Baker College. How you doing, Joanna? And last but not least, and certainly not my least favorite, despite what I just got done saying, is Dr. Dave Shippers, the Chief Academic Officer and Dean of Academics at Walsh College. So if you all, in that exact order that I just did, if we can remember it, if you all want to say a few extra things yourselves, feel free to.
So I'll start. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me. And I'm really happy to be a part of this group and to welcome some of my OCC colleagues who are here. Hi, Bob. Hi, Larry. Hi, Dr. Callahan. And I'll just say, again, my name is Jennifer Byrne, and I actually worked at OCC 30 years ago, but I came back as provost in April of 2020, so 4 weeks into the pandemic. And so I've known almost nothing besides trying to make a better infrastructure for online learning and to try and really transform the institution at a time where our whole lives were transforming. So I look forward to this discussion, and I'll turn it over to Joanna to introduce herself further.
Thank you, Jennifer. I too am excited to be here. I love all of our micro seminars and events that the Alliance hosts. I think we have a great group, and we offer a diverse set of conversations for people to listen to and engage in. I'm really excited to see how what we're doing at Baker College compares to what other institutions are doing right now. And I think that really embodies the spirit of what the Alliance is established for, right? We want to lean and learn best practices from our colleagues. So I'm excited about that today. Thank you.
And I'd also like to, so Dave Skippers, I'd also like to say thank you for the invitation here. I'm looking forward to the conversation, hearing what some of the other institutions are doing. And I'll say, I will warn you, so I came out of the cyber industry, so I'm the propeller head in the group. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go through and you get some answers from me. So I'll just caution you now. So
I believe that Dave just admitted that he's an Android, but I'm not quite sure. We'll find out as we go through this. So thank you for all of that. And Joanne, I want to echo what you were saying. Yes, this is a great time for us. It's going to be a little bit more of an informal session. So we really hope to get a lot of sharing out of this. As I ask these questions to our panelists, I mentioned in the chat already, if you want to introduce yourselves, you can let us know who you are. But as I'm asking these things, feel free to give your point of view. If you have a different institution, or even if you're at the same institution, you can give your point of view. We'd love to see a faculty and staff point of view for some of these things as well. And that's really even going to help these leaders too, to find out a little bit more about it. So feel free to share in and chime in as we're going along. We may have some time for questions. So if you do have specific questions, you don't necessarily know the questions I'm going to ask yet, but feel free to type those questions in and I'll try to work those in if we have some time for them. So with that out of the way, let's get this started here. So this really comes as no surprise to anyone here on this Zoom call, but the pandemic has impacted enrollments at certain institutions. And so I would like to have the panelists talk just a little bit about how the pandemic might have impacted enrollments. And specifically, we're looking at kind of your online programs and courses for this, but you can talk in general too if you'd like. So if you could talk a little bit about how that pandemic might have impacted enrollment at your institution.
I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and jump in. So for Walsh, I'll say one thing I would caveat as I answer this question is I would say, please keep in mind, we're a commuter college. So, we don't have dorms. We traditionally have, career changers and the average age of the student is typically older than the college age. So with that said, obviously during COVID-19, obviously everything spiked. We move everything over into online I'll say post-COVID, our post-COVID view, the demand is still very high. What I would say with this is that, interestingly enough, pre-COVID, with that commuter base, we were already experiencing, I can say in the courses I was teaching at the time, that we had a lot of students with the commute considered and things like that. They were already asking for more hybrid options and more online options anyway. So once that hits, I'll say, I guess I'll be frank, some of our previous executive leadership were very resistant to moving into hybrid models. Once COVID-19 hit, that was basically either you move in the model or you're not going to exist is really what it was. So, and then we transitioned actually, I would say pretty well overall. Like I said, we were already in the space. We're already doing some hybrid stuff. And definitely we're already heavily into the online space as well. So now that's, I'll say, enrollment changes is interesting. So in the post-COVID world, the demand, obviously, for our area, love the icon of Darth Vader on the bottom there. So anyway, Star Wars fans, I had to say that. And to follow up on that, Sean, I'm not an android. I once had students ask me if I was a Terminator sent back from the future. So
that was going to be my second guess.
So the short answer is I am a Terminator sent back from the future. And I totally derailed where I was, but I think where I was the post-COVID, there's still obviously a very high demand for online. There's actually much more even than pre. But I'll say some of the interesting mix on that is, we've got, they almost seem polar opposites. We have some who want to be back in the classroom and they see value in face-to-face. Even if it's not all their classes, they definitely want some. Whereas we also have a different group that is at the other end of the spectrum, and they want pretty much everything online because that's much more convenient to their lifestyle, especially if they're a working adult and they have families and things like that. So I'll stop there and let others jump in.
I'll jump right in and piggyback off that, Dave, because I think I've seen a lot of similar things at Baker College, right? I think for those of us that were already heavily invested in the online space and had solid online support at our institutions, I think we were able to more seamlessly pivot during the pandemic. I think your point about student body is very relevant, right? At Baker College, we have that mix of traditional age students and adult students. I've seen a lot of what we would have traditionally thought of as night and weekend, right? Our adult career changers that are maybe trying to fit school in around other things. They have gravitated a little bit more toward online, and the pandemic kind of pushed some of those that maybe hadn't explored that yet. And I think they stayed there. The traditional students, I think it's a mixed bag because I really think it's what they received as an experience during the pandemic in high school. It either really solidified that they were able to learn that way, or if it wasn't as seamless of a pivot, if it didn't meet their needs as a student learner in high school, it made them more hesitant about online. And I think that's part of that shift that you mentioned, Dave, to the people who are almost gravitated back to, I want that on ground experience, because I think they need it. There was something that was missed during that shift for them. The only other thing I would add is that I've seen as a change post-pandemic is we've adopted online live, which I know some of the other institutions have, the synchronous online that we didn't actually have before. And we've shifted some programs to that were historically on ground. But enrollment, I think we have some people, like Dave said, that want that on ground and want online. And I think their pandemic experience impacted their choices related to that.
And I can add that we have some of the similarities, certainly similarities in student population, but where we are very different is that we were, when the pandemic hit, we were only 5% online. And so we are still in our infancy of what we can do with online teaching and learning. And so for our institution, I think it was a matter of helping us understand that once the pandemic released and we weren't what we called remote, which is taking face-to-face classes and making them online, that we really wanted to draw a distinction between what is an online, optimal online learning space. And we learned quickly that it's not teaching a face-to-face class, but you can be in your pajamas at home. It's really a structural change. And I think the faculty and students learned that for some of them, that structural change was welcome and really intersected with their teaching preferences and their learning preferences. And for some faculty and for some students, it did not. With that said, I would say that one thing we've tried to concentrate on through our Teaching and Learning Center is that, we can always we've been teaching face-to-face for 40 years. We've been teaching online for only about 4. And so we're going to get better and better and better as long as we decide that we want to invest in that improvement. And so it is true that some students don't learn as well online, but it's also true that we can get better at engaging them all the time. And we look forward to doing that because it's actually energized and excited many of us. One more thing, I think our data has shown that as far as enrollment, our turn to more online to 50%, our students now can take more credits. So they can take another class because they could fit the 2 face-to-face in their schedules, but they couldn't fit that third. So that third one that they can do online. So we have seen our average credit hours increase in the last few years.
That's great. And that's really interesting. And you're seeing some of that benefit, as you were saying now, because they have that flexibility. We've seen that at OU for a while now, where if they offer some of those online classes and they can say, I can fit this into my schedule, they can add that to it. Just to give a tiny bit of the OU perspective, someone asked me on the side about a campus that has housing on it. We have still filled up our dorms each and every semester. It was really touch and go during the pandemic time and very interesting things happening during that time. But our face-to-face has stayed fairly strong for the most part. It's really interesting. For years, I'm sure you've all heard about this, there's been a population decline. And so there's always been this forecast of we're going to have less students out of high school. We're going to have less students that are college, age coming up. That was happening regardless of the pandemic. So those two kind of seem to hit at the same time for a few of the institutions around here. And it's been, particularly tricky in that regard. But Jennifer, I really like what you're talking about, is really trying to get all in with this and making this a priority and, seeing what we can do better with this. And my next question sort of dovetails into that, because what I want to talk about is, so at Oakland University, we have our strategic enrollment management plan, and we're always looking at what are we doing for enrollment management. And we started looking at this a little before the pandemic. And that changed a little bit during the pandemic because of what's happening with it, and sort of escalated things through there. So I'm wondering if you all can talk a little bit about, if you may call it something different when you're looking at enrollment management, some things like that, some of the tactics or strategies. But have you had to make different changes to your enrollment management strategy plans based on what's been happening now with the pandemic, or maybe more of a shift to online? Or are you starting to think a little bit more about, here's some of the changes we may need to make with those?
I can add something. I would say that our enrollment strategy has changed from chasing new students to keeping the students we have. And that's a significant shift for any institution. So we certainly, go out and advertise and try to recruit and attract students. But our larger priority is in early momentum for students and keeping those who have expressed interest, because here they are, keeping them engaged, keeping them successful. And I think our online additions have been a great part of that. Even if there's a semester where you can't make it to campus regularly, you can still continue to participate and not completely disengage. So I think, and I have OCC colleagues here who might have other things to say about it, but I think our enrollment strategy has changed significantly post-pandemic.
So I'll add a little bit. What I'll say is we were looking at, I'll say, enrollment strategy changes anyway. A lot of that had to do is we're looking at things like systems replacements and stuff. But in general, I can say that in talking with our COO, who runs admissions and enrollment, which is Tom Patz, as we move forward, there is a lot of back and forth discussion and collaboration on having the right programs and the right format for the demand. So what I'll say is one of the philosophical changes that I've been trying to implement across all of our programs in our institution, especially within academics, is I'll say our fundamental shift, and I would say I do fundamentally believe that it impacts enrollment, is to stop offering what we want to sell for degree programs and start offering what people will actually buy or enroll in. All right. So part of that, and when you talk about strategic enrollment, so we have, I warned you, I was the cyber guy. So here comes the STEM comment. So we have some burgeoning STEM programs. They're doing well. That typically also brings in, I'll say, cybersecurity in particular is an appeal area for things like veterans, F1. When you start looking at those populations, I'll bounce back to the comments on like the online mix. As much as those folks may want to do online, we also still have to offer some version of on-ground or hybrid in order to, deal with all of the different things like DOE requirements and VA and all that kind of fun stuff. But I'll say at a high level, overall, I would say from my perspective, our strategic enrollment plan didn't change solely because of COVID. It's just changing because we're evolving and trying to target things better. I'll say from the retention front, we didn't necessarily have to shift on that. That's been a focus of ours for a number of years now. So, because once we have people in our orbit or in our ecosystem, we want to try to just keep them as much as possible, if that makes sense. So, that's been that way for at least a few years for us. So, and I'll kind of leave it there and pass it along.
I think, yeah, I agree with both of you, Jennifer and Dave. I think it's really thinking about a layered approach to this now. I think the idea of the student life cycle and retaining that student, meeting that student's individualized needs, I think it is more of an evolution of things that likely we all have been doing all along. What's changing is the expectations of the students that we're getting as related to what they need, what they want, and how they can best be successful, how we can support that. I think the one thing that we had been talking about pre-pandemic that has been revved up is this idea of what do students want. Some of them don't want the full 2-year or 4-year program, so embedding credentials within programs so they are getting both a degree and potentially industry credentials at the same time. Are there opportunities for standalone credentials as a bridge to that? We talked, Sean mentioned the retracting traditional age. We also know, we've all read articles about that, the big bucket of potential students of some college, no degree, right? So looking at bridge opportunities, how do we connect those potential students back to higher education, potentially through a standalone certificate that's a bridge to allow them to have some success and wins and get the confidence to return to higher education. The other thing I would say is really looking at partnerships, right? Partnering through articulation agreements with two-year institutions, partnering with industry as well. So I think a lot of things we're seeing in higher ed right now regarding enrollment and increasing enrollment in these times is really looking at pushing higher ed to think of alternate revenue streams that aren't that traditional high school to college student. So I think it's forcing us all to be very nimble right now and not be stuck with one swim lane.
If I can, I'll say if I can jump back in,
Yes,
that's a great lead, Joanna. To answer the question from Dr. Patrick Callahan on that as well. So we do see the need to pair with industry. I'll say in particular in the past, so in doing some work and research with Automation Alley, they had asked, well, where do you see things going? Realistically, basically the workforce retraining needs are going to skyrocket. That's really what we're looking at. So I'll say from my perspective, especially with Walsh and where we sit, I'll say I view us as sitting kind of in a niche space. We obviously appeal to adults that want to, career change and things like that. We have things like certificates and things that will help bridge you over into other careers if you want to make those moves. But I'll say the interesting thing was, as I dug and did research, and then we went through the publication process and review. If you look at World Economic Forum surveys, all of the major industries that they're polling globally are saying, even as you consider bringing AI and ML in and having it start to take over different tasks, they have no intention of releasing people. They're already struggling to hire the people that they need. So they have really no. So if they turn around and say we're going to wipe out, or I shouldn't say wipe out, if we're going to remove the need for people in this particular area, and those tasks are going to be replaced with automation, they're looking to say, how can I partner or train? So can I partner with education, or can I train people myself to take over different functions where I'm already short on people anyway? So as we look at moving forward, I'll say the short version of that, in my opinion, is the pathway for, if you're a small or medium-sized institution, I'll pick on the big R1s. They have big endowments. They're going to do what they want to do because they can do that. They have giant endowments, right? The small to mediums are, your pathway to alternate revenue, in my opinion, is just continuing to try to partner with industry and say, hey, what do you need for training, and making sure we meet that. So that comes back to, I'll say, that comment I said before, which was build things people want to buy, not that you want to sell. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. Jennifer, I don't know if you want to talk really briefly about potential partnerships and things like that as well.
Yeah, I would just say that, as a public institution like Oakland University, we're obligated to our community, and we're obligated to Oakland 80 by 30 to get 80% of the adults in Oakland County credentialed by a degree or a credential, a professional credential by 2030. And so we need to work with the students who come to us, but we also need to go out and figure out who are the employers who are struggling to work with their employees, and how can we help? So it's always been a mission of the community college to be in the community and serve the community, as I think it is for all the institutions represented today, and that means doing traditional degrees and certificates, but also non-traditional things, as Dave says, that people want, and we're very eager to do that.
Thank you. And Dave, I'm going to actually throw in a question here based on one of the things you said, which I think was really poignant. And we were looking at what degrees that students want, and not the ones that we want to teach, or the ones that we've done traditionally. This is something that we're looking at OU, maybe not as much as we should, but something we're starting to look at a little bit more of that. I'm curious if you can talk really briefly, and if others have things to say about this, about some of your strategies for that. So for example, at OU, we use a program that's now called Lightcast Analyst. It used to be called Burning Glass, and MC or EMSI merged together, but we use that market research program to try to tell us a little bit about that, talk to industry partners. But can you talk a little bit about how you're determining that?
When you're saying how to determine, like how to build what people want,
yeah. So how are you
really
determining when you say like we want to try to get what students might actually need? How are you going about determining that?
Sure. I'll say so. I'll reference specifically within again the STEM space. So when I was chair of the Information Technology Decision Sciences Department, when I came into that role, so we're a NSA CAE designated institution. So we have to, I'll say, meet their standards and expectations. Part of that is having an advisory board. So we actually, within that area, we have two advisory boards. We have an information technology advisory board and we have a data analytics advisory board. So what we're typically doing, Sean, in order to say, hey, I'll say it's interesting. So, because some people say, I'll say, if you want to look at a degree as a product that you sell, if you want to look at it that way, some people will argue with you about, well, who's the real customer? Is it the student who obtains the degree, or is it the business that hires the graduate? Okay, I mean, and there's always opinions on this, all right? And I'll say nobody has to agree with what I'm going to say. I'm just going to say this is my perspective. So my perspective is they both are, all right? But what I would also say is the ultimate gateway, if you fundamentally believe that the educational purpose of a degree is to help a career burgeon and move forward, if that's genuinely what that degree seeker is after, then really the gateway for them is what do the businesses want for competencies and skills within that particular industry, right? So within that, I'll use the example of the information technology and cybersecurity industry. We bring in different people from that community, so within different business organizations. And we have them tell us, what are the trends? What are you looking at? We specifically work with them and have them review our degree programs. And I specifically go through and say, tell me what we are not covering that you see changing. I mean, so these are the things that we try to keep how we try to keep our finger on the pulse, Sean. So that is the primary gateway. We're listening to students as well. So it's not like we just ignore their opinions. We want to make sure that we're building, those competencies and skills that they're interested in. I'll be honest, there's times, especially within STEM fields, where you have students who come through with a preconceived notion of what's needed within the industry. And then we're hearing different things from the industry members that are active. I can say I worked for quite a few years out in the IT and cyber industry. So there's times when students are telling me, that's not what they want. And I'm like, I live the industry. I know this, I know the core skills you're going to need and things like that. But I'll say the short version, Sean, is that is really the gateway to making sure that you have the finger on the pulse. Those advisory board groups, but you have to, I'll say one of the things that you have to be careful with those is you have to stay active with them, and you actually have to make them see that their feedback is impacting your programs. Because if they don't necessarily see that, they may not be interested in continuing to provide or committing the time and effort that they're giving you in order to try to have a positive impact.
I think one more place to find that is, for us in a large part, is our adjunct faculty are out in the community working during the day, many of them, and coming and working with our students at night. And so they bring, an example being our mental health social work adjunct faculty taught us that we needed to have a certificate in addiction studies because that's where there's a great need in our community. So relying on the faculty's context in the community also, I think, helps us move forward and know where we need to be going.
Excellent. Thank you. Great comments on that. And Dave, I appreciate your industry background. Dave, he told me earlier that he helped to build the first RoboCop. So that's just a little known fact about Dave there. So let's talk a little bit more about some benefits of the pandemic, or I should say, let's swing into the benefits of the pandemic. So the pandemic was a terrible time. We can all agree it was a terrible time, besides the fact that I got to grow my hair out and look as ridiculous as this. Other than that, it was a terrible time. But in all reality, there was a lot of benefits in terms of what might have happened with the realm of online learning. So I'm wondering if you all can talk a little bit about what you saw or are seeing as benefits from the pandemic in terms of maybe opinions changing or practices changing, things like that, in your institutions.
Yeah, I can jump in to get this one started. I think two things. I think we can probably actually think of a lot of things, which is interesting because I agree, Sean, terrible time, but how do we kind of see the positive impact in the aftermath of that? I think changing opinions is huge, right? We talked about originally the students. There's a little bit of a divide there, maybe based on their experience they had during the pandemic. But I think faculty, I'd like to kind of call out faculty who were maybe nudged to consider online in a different way. So whether they were hesitant, resistant, whatever adjective we might want to use, I think it really challenged faculty to think about how could they successfully help students learn in an online delivery mode. So what I've seen after that is similar to students, some faculty are super excited to be back in the classroom, but I see more of a mix. I see faculty now looking at the content and the skills that students need to learn and thinking of the delivery mode that best suits it. I see that more than I used to, where I see programs that were traditionally fully on ground, like diagnostic sonography, and those people are now coming to the online department to say, hey, I have some courses that would be better in this format because the students are in clinical, it's didactic, it would really actually help them on many fronts. So I think faculty's change and their perception toward online is something I saw as a benefit. And then the other thing I'm proud of, at least from our institution, is it really challenged us on how we're going to serve students outside of the classroom. So student services. We now have a fantastic virtual tutoring platform that is highly interactive and successful. And then mental health services as well, right? We know that that's a big topic and theme within higher education right now. And so I think increasing student services for all of our students, but the benefit was I think we served our online students better. And those things have stuck post-pandemic.
I think the most dramatic and impactful positive change has been the kind of re-professionalization of teaching and learning. I think when many people who'd not taught online went remote, it was they made the familiar strange. So they'd been teaching English or math for 20 years in a certain way, and all of a sudden everything was shifting underneath them. And that, I think, made us all extremely introspective about what are the skills and competencies required for good face-to-face teaching and for good online teaching. And I think it's really prompted, to me, a revitalization of the discussion of the skills and strategies needed to be an excellent instructor. And I'm really excited by what the move to remote did for people's face-to-face instruction. I mean, many, many, many more technology enhanced face-to-face experiences than we had before, and really taking the best, and oftentimes the best of face-to-face, the best of online, sometimes making it a hybrid, but sometimes just creating the synergies so that one of those modalities takes on all of the best of the others. And so I am really appreciative of seeing that. I think our teaching as a profession is going to be forever improved because of that, because of a very hard time.
I'll kind of wrap up a little bit on that. So I'll say, not dissuading the comments that, obviously COVID-19, societally had a, pretty negative impact, but I'll say across, because I've been keeping tabs on cyber industry, and I would say across higher ed as well, I view COVID-19 as an accelerator. So it really accelerated the trends that were already in place. So for instance, I agree with what's been said already. So, it has forced different groups to either embrace change or embrace thinking differently. So it accelerated that. In some cases, it may have forced people to do that that never would have traditionally. I can also tell you, there were some people who said, peace out, I'm retiring. You know what I mean? So it just, again, it accelerated that decision. So, you can take that for what it is. Overall, as I mentioned earlier in our discussion here today, I had said, previous leadership with Walsh was they were very not interested in hybridization of courses or virtual synchronous, so like a Zoom synchronous remote type situation. And then again, once COVID-19 hit, it was either you do it or you die. I mean, so it was an immediate accelerator on those things. So overall, I mean, from my perspective, I would agree with the statements that we've had people start to look significantly differently as well. I will say, we had a very strong online presence with online courses. So there's that piece was already there. I think it pushed some of the few remaining who may not have been strong in it to be more in that arena. But where it definitely did help us, in my opinion, is the implementation of more technology in the classroom so that when you have hybridized courses, you have more there. You can connect with both the remote and the local audience simultaneously better. So again, it was an accelerator and it moved things forward. So I'll wrap with that.
Excellent. I love the idea of accelerator. I'm going to use that.
Sean?
Yes, please.
Sean, can I ask a question at this point? How do you determine the proper mix of offering on-ground, online, and hybrid classes, and its correlation also with academic discipline? And secondly, do you see a correlation of students wanting class offerings that mirror their hybrid opportunities to work in the real world?
Yeah, thank you for that. And part of that, Dave was talking a little bit about when he was talking about, determining what they have with that. Does anyone want to talk a little bit more about how they're determining, aside from some of the things you already mentioned with what students want, how you're determining your mix of what you're offering?
I can start with that. So realistically, within the last year or so, after I've taken over as CAO, we've moved to a centralized scheduling process. So we are seeing what is filling up centrally. So I have a general view into what are students actually enrolling. And so in essence, when I have to start adding additional sections within a particular modality, I'm starting to see the trends, right? So you can go, okay, which modality is filling up faster? The short version here is I can put one hybridized section on the books, and I'm probably going to need 2 onlines, is typically the way that it's working right now. So that's at minimum 2, if not 3 to 1. Is the expectation there, to be honest. Now, again, I'll bump back to like F1 and veteran. They often have to have a certain amount of on ground. So we have to make sure that we have the right mix to make sure that the needs that they have are met, across their different programs that they have. But in essence, I'll say that's where I would start, and I'll kind of pass it off if anybody else wants to jump on that.
Yeah, I would add similarly, I think kind of using student registration, like where are they voting almost, right, for the modality that they prefer. I don't think we're done seeing it. Like I wouldn't want to use, it's hard to even use last year's as a prediction for this year's. We do, but I don't think we've quite settled to where we're going to settle just yet, right? I think we're seeing students kind of shift around and try different things a little bit more than we might have before. But yes, I think definitely using student registration and what they're choosing as their preferred mode. I see at Baker, I see a lot of students, maybe if their preferred mode is on ground for their program courses, we're seeing a lot of general education courses that are maybe taken in the alternate delivery mode. So even if they are primarily face-to-face, whether it's virtual, synchronous, or in seat, they are a little bit more flexible with those courses that are general education or electives. That would be a trend I've seen thus far. We see a lot of interest in that online live, that synchronous online for student courses that I think students think are going to be more challenging and difficult, right? Like the number of statistics sections. They don't necessarily want to be in person with the instructor, but they want to be live with the instructor. So comm classes, stats classes, research methods, those classes I see, those ones that students have anxiety about, they're choosing that best of both worlds, live with the instructor, but I'm still at home in my pajamas, right? So that's what I've seen for trends, but I don't think we're done seeing where it's going to level out. I think it's going to continue to evolve a little bit before we see it settle.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, I think it's an art and a science, and I think there's a lot of tension around it. Tension in what students want versus what the outcomes show are better modes, what different disciplines have to offer, what different individuals have to offer. So I think we're going to be working on it for a long time. And that's probably good because we're continuing to look to collect data to see what's effective and to see how it is impacting completion, which is what we all are interested in.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about high flex, the hybrid flexible, or the ones where you have, however you may refer to these as, where you have a traditional on-ground class that has also this live component of it as well, where students can sort of jump in between. They can show up in class one day, online the next day, that sort of thing. I know a lot of institutions are looking at that. I'm curious to see, are your institutions looking at these? And you can just talk in general about them. Do you have to have policies on them? You have to have new hardware. Like OU has looked at policies. What is the definition of it? We've gotten some new hardware in classrooms to make sure we have mics in different places. So how are you all dealing with what most people are calling high flex classes or programs?
So I'll jump in. So from a high flex perspective, what we did is I'll say like Tom Patz and others within Walsh actually sat down and went, what is the design and what are the goals that we want this particular, I'll say, high flex classroom to be able to do? So there is a technical aspect around that, like what capabilities do you need within that classroom? Because you do want it set up in a way that if you're teaching in that, if you're the faculty member that is teaching in that environment, that you can operate seamlessly between the people in the room with you and the people remote out in the cloud, right? So you want that to come across as one cohesive experience for both parties, if you will, involved. The other pieces, I would say, I won't get into all the policy details, but I would argue you do want to start wrapping around like what policies go with that. Because what you're going to run into if you haven't done a lot of it is once you turn it on, it's not uncommon, depending upon how your students operate within that class, they may show up for only certain sessions. So they may only show up for the very first session. They may only show up for other sessions that are, I'll say maybe midterms, finals, particularly high impact items. And then one of the things I will say, I won't get into the details, is that some faculty members tend to think, well, if nobody's in the room with me, I'm just going to flip it to virtual synchronous. So I'm just going to turn around and run it as a Zoom remote. So policy needs to, you as an institution need to decide, is that acceptable? Now, one of the problems, again, I'm going to bounce back to that F1 and that impact of they have to be on ground. And they actually have to check in. Sometimes they have to check in each week. And so if you flip that, there's implications for those pieces. So I would just caution, like, if you're going to go that, I'm not going to give you answers for your institution, but those things should be thought through. So
I'll just quickly say when we were designing our high flex classrooms, we went and visited our friends at Walsh to see what they were doing because they'd been doing it for a long time. And we designed them based on much of their advice. We took some of our federal stimulus money from the COVID and built them. I would only offer that I haven't personally taught high flex. What my colleagues who I've experimented with tell me is that it's a whole new pedagogy and that it's not teaching people in two different ways. It's teaching one group in a whole different way. And that is, I really admire those people who are pursuing it.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that. I had some more questions here, mainly about robotics and things like that, but we're unfortunately near the end of our time here. Are there any just within the last couple of minutes, any quick closing remarks that you all would like to make? I do want to say I appreciate everything you shared with us so far, and we'll do a quick wrap up.
I just want to say thanks to everybody. Appreciate the invite. Hope what's been shared has been helpful. I'm going to have to head out in a few minutes to catch my time portal back to the future. Otherwise, the other Terminators are going to come looking for me, just FYI. So.
Yes, and I want to thank you all. I've learned a lot, and I hope that I can become more integrated into this organization. It's been, wonderful to see a mix of faculty and staff and administrators. And I appreciate my colleagues, Joanna and Dave, and what they've shared.
Yeah, I will just echo that. I think we could probably have a part 2 and a 3 and a 4. because we are all so academically invested in all of this. I think it's just great to highlight some of the things that we've done to evolve all of our institutions to serve students post-pandemic. And so I've really appreciated being here today.
Excellent. Thank you. We're going to have Dave go back in time. So we're going to start this all again and see if the answers are different. That might be interesting.
If he could tell us what programs those future students want when he comes back.
I'll hang on. I'm going to go back 15 minutes and I'll tell you.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Sean, and thanks to everybody. This has been a great session. Again, it's 21 years we've had the Alliance, and there's been wonderful dialogues that we've had, and the benefit is obviously, you can see it real time here. So I can't thank everybody enough for their time. Again, thanks to Walsh for sponsoring as far as the technology platform we're using here. You will receive an email when this learning object is available for everybody to share with your colleagues. I can't tell you how many times I see the sharing of these sessions with the colleagues, because they can obviously review it at any time. And so thank you so much to everybody for participating in today's event. Just to wrap up, going forward, we're going to continue to have micro seminars. We still want to get back face-to-face with our symposium. That's a goal for next year, or maybe the year after. We're listening to our membership. So stay tuned. We're going to keep you updated on programming that we've got available. We're also going to do our survey again. I think the survey is extremely important. Every year we survey our member institutions, because those survey results really help us kind of identify key issues that we can address them from a learning perspective going forward. So thank you, Sean. Thank you to all of our presenters, and we look forward to seeing you at our next session. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good day, everyone.